Hi guys, my name is Richard and welcome back to the RQ Studio. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create a simple ETL pipeline that involves loading data from an S3 bucket into Snowflake, transforming that data, and finally connecting Power BI to Snowflake for data visualization of your results. So let's dive right in. To log in, we are going to Google Snowflake. We are going to click on Start for free. And for those that have not used it before, and those that are using it for personal development, just follow the steps. So I'm just going to put in some dummy data because I already have an account. If you're using it for personal development and learning, I would advise that you don't need to put your work email there. Perhaps you can put a personal email there, right? Sorry, richie@gmail.com. Great. So I just wanted to get to this next step to show you that in the next step, you have to put a company name, could be a dummy company title, but here you get to select the edition you want to use. So let's name it Rich. Let's name my company Rich Co. Job title AI and data consultant. And with the Snowflake edition, the most popular is the enterprise that allows you to have 90 days time travel, multi-cluster warehouse, and materialized views. However, for training and personal development, I'm just going to select standard because that's what I'm using, right? It gives you a strong balance between features, levels of support, and cost, and I think is enough for this video. So you have to select a cloud service provider because Snowflake is linked to several cloud service providers depending on what you decide on here. So because of my experience in AWS, I click on AWS and I'm going to select the region. You always have to select the region that is closest to you that you are using with your cloud service provider. For me, I'm in Africa, so I'll select Cape Town because that is the closest data center to Ghana, and I'll click on Get Started, right? So I already have an account, so I'm just going to go straight into my account. And this is how it looks like from the inside. So on the inside, we have the left-hand pane that has the home button that takes you to the home screen. We also have the add button where you can add a script. So in Snowflake, you can either write scripts in SQL or in Python. So you decide which one you want to use. And it also has connections to Git repository and the likes. You can create tables and the likes. Yeah, so I'm going to click on create a SQL script, and it will take us to this page, a worksheet, and then we'll start writing our script. However, I already have some scripts that details what we intend to do, creating the pipeline, right? And as I mentioned, we are creating a pipeline that connects AWS S3 buckets to Snowflake such that we can load data that is sitting in an AWS S3 bucket into Snowflake. So I already have some data sitting in an S3 bucket. Let me just show you the raw data file. Right, so it's a supermarket sales table, right? And let's assume that this table was gotten from an e-commerce website, and the back end of the website, the storage of the data was done with AWS, right? And it was sitting in an S3 bucket. And then now you decide that you want to be able to derive some insights from the data. So you decide to create a warehouse, load the data, transform the data, and also visualize the data, right? So as you can see, it has about 12 or 13 columns, 17 columns, and then about 1,000 rows, right? Yeah, 1,000 rows. So this is the data we are going to be looking at in S3, and we are going to be loading that into Snowflake. The first step we are going to do is to create a database, and that's going to be where we will be working in Snowflake. And now within that database, we need to create a schema. A schema is basically a location, or think of it as a folder. I like to think of it as a folder where we store our tables, right? So inside the database, we are naming a database second DB. We're going to create a schema that we will name raw data folder schema. And then inside that schema, we are going to create a table that has all the columns that was listed in the Excel file or in the data that we intend to import. Then, in order to successfully create that pipeline or load the data, we need to create a file format object. Essentially, what this does is it tells Snowflake the format of the file that is going to be imported into Snowflake, such as what type of file is it. So here we are telling Snowflake that we intend to load a CSV file that has a comma delimiter, and its first row consists of column headers. So skip the first row and load the rest of the data. And also, we need to create a storage integration object. Now, this storage integration object is the connection between AWS and Snowflake, right? So we need to set up let them know that this is an external stage we are creating. The storage provider where the data sits is S3. I mean, if it wasn't S3 and it was Azure or GCP, we'll put that there. We've enabled the integration, so it's true. And then we will also have to put in the AWS ARN role. We'll get into that. And then we'll put in the location of the file in the S3 bucket to put that. So once we create this storage integration object and we create this file format object, then we can now create a stage within Snowflake. Now, I'm sure you may be wondering, what is a stage? Now, think of a stage as a landing zone within Snowflake where data is received, right? So in this instance, we are going to receive the data from the S3 bucket into Snowflake, into its landing zone, and then we are now going to unpack that data into the table we created. So let's say you are traveling, right? Think of you as the data. You sit in a plane and the plane flies all the way to the country you're going to. You get to your destination, and the airport is what? The landing zone. Once the plane lands, you definitely need to get off the plane and everything needs to be unpacked, and then you leave to go to your final destination, right? So think of the stage as the airport or the landing zone, right? So we need to create a landing zone that is not going to house, that's going to house the source of the data within Snowflake, right? So we will name our stage AWS file folder, right? And we need to add, the path of the file, the integration object we will create, and the file format object we will create. And then finally, from that landing zone, we will unpack that data into the table we've created using the copy into command, right? So the copy into command is going to load the data from the AWS file folder into the raw data folder that we have created up here, this raw data folder, right? And then finally, we'll just preview the data and cross-check if it's working. Okay, so that's like a high-level overview of what this entails for loading the data into Snowflake. So now let's dive right into creating it. So the first step I'm going to look at is to create a database, and I'm naming my database second DB. The database has been successfully created. I'm going to create my schema, and great, you can see raw data folder successfully created. And then we're going to create this table, and as I mentioned, the column names within, you can see here, are the same column names that exist in the Excel file, right? So I'm going to highlight this. And create my table. And then now, I'll just preview that table with select all from the name of the table, which is raw data. So voila, as you can see, our table has been created, but then no data exists in the table, so the table is showing as empty. So we'll fill that very soon. But first, we need to create our file format object, right? So this, as I've already stated the properties for the file, so I'll just run this script. File format, my CSV format has been created. So think of the name as a variable that and encompasses or holds the format of the file. And now we are going to be creating our storage integration, right? Before we jump into creating our storage integration, in order to acquire this ARN role, we need to create a role in S3, and we also need to go to S3 to get the path or the location of the file. So let's move on to S3. Okay. So I've entered into my S3 console. I'm going to click on S3 bucket. So in my S3, I have a number of buckets. I'm going to be using the sales bucket. Within a sales bucket, I'm going to be using the sales imported data folder because that is the location of the file I intend to use. So as you can see the name of the file, right? So on the top left-hand corner of the screen, you can see S3 bucket, sales bucket, and sales imported data. So essentially, this is the information we need, which is serving as the file path. So I'm going to take that and paste it in the storage allowed location. So as you can see, I've written S3, then bucket name. So I'm going to put the bucket name here. Sales bucket. And then the folder name. So I'll go back to S3. The folder name is what? Sales imported data. We already have our backslash in here. So I'll just put the name of the folder. Great. And now we need to create this AWS role ARN. We need to get the ARN ID. So we are going to go to AWS and we are going to go to IAM. IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. So this is the portal or service where we will create a role within AWS to give AWS to allow Snowflake to have access to an S3 bucket. So we have to create that role. So in here, I'm going to click on roles. So I'm going to create a new role. Click on AWS accounts. And in the account ID, I'm going to input my own ID. Requires external ID. I'm going to use 000 for now, but we will change that. I'm going to select the S3 service. Go next. Name it Snow. And as you can see in JSON formats, these are the properties for the role we are creating. I'll click on create role. And our role has been successfully created. You can see it down here. So I'll click on that. And within the properties of the role created, you can see the ARN ID here. So I'll just copy that. We're going to go back to Snowflake and paste that here. Great. So now we have our S3 storage integration object complete. So we are going to run that. Great. So we have successfully created our integration object. We named it S3 Connect, right? However, that's not all you need to do to connect to AWS. As I mentioned, we need to fetch or input the actual external ID and use our ARN. So we're going to do that by taking it from Snowflake. We're going to describe the connection we just created. Right. So when I run the script, describe integration S3 Connect, you can see the properties of that integration object. And here we have the IAM user ARN property, and we're going to take the property value, right? Click on copy. We're going to go back to Snowflake. Sorry, we're going to go back to AWS, and in trusted relationship, we are going to edit the policy, change this, and the external ID. In the same properties, we have storage AWS external ID. So we're going to take this ID, copy the property, go back, and replace the zeros with the property. All right. And we're going to update policy. Great. And so we have successfully ensured that the relationship is a trusted relationship between Snowflake and AWS by inputting the external ID and the user ARN. Right. And the next step is to create the stage. As I mentioned, the stage is the landing zone area that's going to house the file that has the data that is sitting in AWS. So we are naming our stage AWS file folder, and in here we have to input the bucket name and the folder name, right? This is just a comment. So we already have that here, so I'm just going to copy that. Copy. Right. And I also needed to state the storage integration objects that we created. That's the S3 connect. I also had to state the file format object that we created. That is the my CSV format. As you can see from here, my CSV format. So I'll run this script. Okay. And now our stage has been created successfully. Stage area AWS file folder created successfully. Right, so think of it as the plane has landed in Snowflake. So we are come to unpack the passengers, which is the data from the landing zone area or the stage, into the table that we created called raw data, right? So we are going to make use of the copy into command. So this command is now going to copy the data from the landing zone, that is from my CSV folder, from the AWS file folder into this. So I'll run the script. Voila. And 1000 rows have been loaded into Snowflake, and we can preview that data. And we have confirmed that we have been able to successfully load data from AWS into Snowflake. Great. So the next thing we are going to be looking at is how to transform that data into the format that we need and also connect to Power BI. So we have been able to successfully load data into our raw data table, right? What we're going to do next is we're going to transform the loaded data, and we are going to store that transformed data in a different table, in a different schema. It's a good practice to not transform the data or the raw data that you have in that specific table, because perhaps in the future you may need that raw data for something else or some different transformation. So it's a good practice to always create a different table and then store your transform data in that table. So essentially we are at the transform stage, extract, transform, load, right? So we also had a transform stage, depending on how you look at it, right? And so since we've been able to load our raw data into the raw data table, as you can see, what we're going to do next is we're going to perform some transformation on this data. And the transformation I want to do is I want to change the column headers such that they have an underscore where a space is. So as you can see, customer type has a space, product line has a space, unit price has a space. So looking down at my script, you can see create or replace table inside the second DB analytics folder. In the analytics table, so the name of the table that we intend to store our transform data, I have named it analytics, right? And in that table, we are going to have these columns with these names. So as you can see, we have the underscore for each of them, right? So this is the transformation I want to perform on the data. And also I want to add a new column where I realized that from the data, we don't have a total column that is a total as a result of multiplying units price and quantity. So we've added that as the final column and named it total revenue. So I'm going to run that, but before then, we need to create our schema that is going to house this data. So I'm just going to run this script, create schema, if not exist, analytics data folder, right? And it has been created successfully. Now in that schema, I'm going to run this table. So we've been able to create the table successfully, and we can view this table. We can preview that table, and the transformation has been done. So as you can see, from the column headers, we have the underscore in between invoice and ID, customer type, product line, unit price, and let's just scroll and see. Great. So the column we added in addition to the table is total revenue. We have that here. Great. So we've been able to successfully perform a simple transformation on our data. The next step we are going to be looking at is how to connect Snowflake to Power BI so that we can import or make a direct query or direct link and visualize our results in Power BI. So it's a good practice to perform all your transformation during this stage of the pipelining process, such that when you're connecting to an analytics tool or visualization tool, there's going to be minimal transformations that would be needed to be done on the data. So ideally, that's why data engineers work with data analysts. So that the data analyst tells the data engineer the columns they want to see, the kind of data they want to see, and the data analyst and the data engineer performs that transformation, puts that table together. If it's multiple tables, he would connect them together, make a single table, or provide you with the necessary access to the right tables so that you can, visualize your data essentially in Power BI or in QuickSight, Google Studio, and whichever analytics tool you decide, right? So this is a simple ETL, and let's go into Power BI now. I have Power BI open. We're going to go to get data, and we can go to database and look for Snowflake, or we can search for it by typing Snowflake. Click on it, connect, and it's asking us for the server name and the warehouse name. So we're going to pick that from Snowflake. And in Snowflake, once you go to the settings, click on accounts, click on view account details. You have access to the server name here. So I'm just going to copy that. That's the text over right here. I'm going to go back and paste that in there. And in the warehouse name, so remember I mentioned the name of the warehouse that sits in Snowflake. So going back, the warehouse name is Compute WH, right? Compute underscore WH, right? So we are going to take that. So the name of the warehouse is this, and we're going to take that and then paste it here, or type it in. And there you have it. Snowflake is open. So I would like to add that for first-time users, if you haven't connected to Snowflake before, a login page is going to come up and they're going to ask you to log in with the same credentials you used in Snowflake. So just watch out for that. So here we get to see all the databases that exist in that warehouse. And the first DB is the database we created. And under first DB, we have the analytics folder. We also have the information schema, the public schema, and the raw data folder. And as you can see, we can preview the raw data folder, and also under the analytics folder, we can preview the transform data. So I'm just going to load that into Snowflake, and it's going to ask you, do you want to import the raw data that is a batch dump into Power BI, or do you want to connect to it via direct query so that you do your analysis in real time or your graphs and charts in real time. Right, I'm just going to select import for now. And we have successfully imported or loaded our data into Snowflake. As you can see, the columns exist. The column names are shown, and the raw data is still in the same format that it was. Click on close and apply. So now your data has been loaded successfully into Power BI. So you can have a look at the columns on the right hand side of the screen and visualize them according to the visuals you decide on. So now you can visualize your data in Power BI and analyze the data according to your analysis questions or your preference. So there you have it. Thanks guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Peace out. Watch out for my next video.